I read the piece. The part that was most interesting to me is you break down, historically, people think of creators as creators first, and then they might be able to figure out how to monetize that. What all of these platforms have done, though, is they've allowed entrepreneurs, whether they're venture funded, kind of tech types founders, or just entrepreneurial in nature, to now start to build these content businesses, right? It's almost like the cost of starting one of these businesses has drastically been driven down by the Substacks, by the YouTubes, by the podcasting platforms. Very similar to what we saw, let's say, with server costs, right? There was an explosion of startups that happened because simply now you could spin up AWS rather than have to go buy a server and set it up. And so that to me is interesting, because what you get is a blurring of the line, right? Is somebody who, let's take away all of our investing activity, everything. If you just look at the things that I've done on the content side, is it that you're an entrepreneur, or is it that you're a creator? And what's the difference, right? And you can kind of go down, whether it's the Substack list or other platforms, and you start to actually look at the skill set that's necessary is very different than the skill set of, hey, just go work inside the media company. Right. And so I think that that's the other piece of this, where everyone's like, oh, all the journalists are going to leave the media organizations. I'm like, there's a lot of people who actually are not entrepreneurial, that not at all, like they're scared, right? They just want to stay where they are, safe, get a salary, and they're perfectly happy, right? It's not a bad thing. Like they're happy doing that. But then there is a subset of people, and the question is, how big is that subset that want to go do this? And I think that's kind of what you're hitting at here is, are those people creators that were doing it already and now building a business, or were they business people who now are seeing an opportunity and they're coming in and creating any kind of content, really?
No, I mean, it's so right on, right? I think everybody, a lot of people are saying like, okay, when you go and become your own, creator business, you go and create a Substack, you go and create, a brand on TikTok, that now you get to just focus on doing what you do best, creating. And it's the opposite. It's like when you decide to go and do that, you're actually assuming the business of your entire self. You're basically saying, yes, I'm going to create, but I am now choosing and willingly going to take on all of this work in order to help build my brand, my business, and really try to figure out entrepreneurially how we go there. And that's a totally different skill set. I think that's why right now, some of like the earliest people in this space, especially like in that Substack crew, but even newsletter creators like Webb Smith that have done it outside, they're here to stay, right? I think everyone who's kind of in at this moment has really figured out what they need to do in order to kind of like support their own business, how to kind of manage certain times, how to focus on distribution and really be able to see what's next. But that also, on top of that, I think that's also an acknowledgement that we probably have 1% of the creators that are like interested and willing to like leave and do it because of that, that need for them to be able to own it all, right? That's a particular person that could really do that. This next phase of like creator economy, passion economy, whatever you want to call it, there's so much focus, and people that I'm talking about that are, or people that I'm talking to, and people that are investing in this space around that notion of comfort and confidence, right? So if you know that right now it takes a particular creator who really understands not just how to build audience and create, but also manage a business, then how do you start to attract the millions and millions and millions of other people who would be willing to come over and do this if they weren't so nervous about health insurance, if they weren't so nervous about getting sued and liable, if they weren't so nervous about the fact that they don't have an editor or don't have a designer or don't have newsroom support. And what's incredible is that is not going to be a catalyst for people to not come over. That's actually going to be a catalyst for builders to build those products and build those sort of networks and marketplaces and support in order to recognize that that pool is a ton of people that would be willing and interested to come over if those things are built. So that's really like the next phase of what's happening here. I think phase one was, okay, can creators go out and do this on their own? And are there enough tools for them to be able to actually create and put content out there? Now it's, okay, how do we build things that help support that business? Which kind of goes full circle to the emphasis of media companies at record labels. It's not really a choice. I think if they don't figure out how to structure their companies in order to focus on creators and build for creators to manage that sort of talent and delivery, then these companies are going to be built outside of them and things are just going to run, right? So it's kind of no longer a choice, but more so starting to kind of make that transition and make that approach. But one more thing that's really interesting on top of that though, is like, and I talk about this in Renaissance Creator, is that newsletters kind of had the same effect as streaming in a very weird way, right? Like the music industry was kind of dead when Napster came out. And Napster didn't come out because people wanted free music, right? Napster was basically developed because no one could stand the UX of the music experience. No one wanted to buy a $20 CD, you know, at whatever your local record store was for a single track. Nobody liked like how bulky and kind of the cost structure and everything around that experience, to the point where like Sean Parker and co built Napster to basically say, okay, we're going to build an experience that consumers actually want when it comes to listening to music. And what came out of that, right, via Spotify, was that not only did people stop stealing music, but now they're paying for it, right? Because it's an experience they like, it's a relationship they like. There's a ton of arguments that could be thrown at me, which I get all the time at Twitter, which is like, is it better for the artist? Separate conversation. But for the consumer, right, Napster and streaming really kind of broke through and built a better business for music than it was when it was totally broken down via the Napster era. Newsletters are kind of the same, right? Like we're forgetting now, because of all the media growth, that 2 or 3 years ago, you had an ad blocker on, right? You didn't want to go to a site and read content and see ads, and you chose to turn that blocker on. You would bypass paywalls constantly, right? Like you, like mainly, like maybe you wouldn't even go and see that content, or you'd type the URL into Google and you'd circumvent it. You did not want to pay for content, and you didn't not want to pay for content because you didn't believe content was valuable. You just didn't like that experience, right? And what newsletters have done in a very weird way is really broker that one-to-one relationship again, right? And there's like weird synergies. It's like, I get your newsletter in my inbox. There's nothing stopping me from forwarding your newsletter to 10, 11, I mean, there's tracking and stuff, but there's ways to go about it. But nobody does that, right? Nobody does that because there's a relationship with the creator. They like the way that it's being delivered to them. They like the experience. There's a value exchange, and they know what they're paying for, and they think that that's valuable, and they're getting that back. So it's kind of changed, like the newsletter ecosystem has kind of also changed the way that the broader media ecosystem really thinks about the value of content because of that. And I kind of believe that it was like less severe, but the Napster moment was kind of ad blocking, paywalls, users are fed up with that way of navigation content. Here comes newsletters or independent creators that are building a new relationship value exchange. And now all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, content is valuable and I do like this. And media companies are starting to adjust the way that they operate in order to accommodate that UX. And it's kind of a similar sort of slope that I think is just really, really, really badass to pay attention to.